incoming senior at Bolsagadi High School, and this summer I've had the fortunate opportunity to work with United Way and AAA as an ITIS intern, that is Information Technology and Information Systems. Next slide, please. Here are some of the topics that I'll be covering today. Just to start, quick show of hands, who here either has a AAA membership or has family that has a AAA membership, especially for the parents? They say in Southern California especially, 1 in every 2 households has someone in their family that has a AAA membership. In particular though, AAA, when we talk about AAA as an organization, as a brand here, it's actually made out of 3 companies. So the first one, a click please, we have the Automobile Club of Southern California. This started in 1902 in LA. It was a bunch of rich business owners who had $100,000 Ford cars, Model T, Model A. They were starting off, they were advocating to create more roads. And then eventually all these auto clubs came together, another click please, to create the Auto Club Enterprises, that is ACE. And they made these federations. The one that we're in is the biggest in AAA, and we're the biggest in ACE. There are 17 million members in that group, and they serve 23 states. And then over that is the big organization called the American Automobile Association. Next, please. So, what did my daily work and here, BAU, my business as usual, look like throughout those 5 weeks? Next slide, please. So, a quick overview. Every single week, we had a different manager. And I'll talk more about that communication aspect in a little bit. My first week was with...
Sorry.
All good, all good. My first week was with Guidewire. This was more development, learning how developers get stuff done in the workplace and make sure they have products and deployables to put out by the end of the fiscal year. The second week, these are the middle managers, the people that help coordinate departments together, project management. The third week was all about phishing and vulnerabilities. In my opinion, that was my favorite week. The fourth week was more hands-on activity. We worked with a database language called SQL, made our own databases, and made hypertext markups. And then our fifth week, we're actually going through right now, which is why me and the other AAA kids are running off to work right after this presentation. Next slide, please. Their culture is very unique. As an insurance provider, their focus is always in members first, which makes sense. You always want to put your customer first. For that, within the workplace, where we're working at the administrative offices for ACE, they're calling this a transition between a culture 1, which is more stereotypical and traditional, to a culture 2. And that culture 2 is focused on 2 aspects. Focused feedback, that is criticism that is fair and unbiased and does not give into stereotypes, and recognition, making sure that they recognize the employees that do the most thing. In the employee handbook, we were given the handbook to begin. It's some 200-page document. But at the beginning and throughout it, it always emphasizes providing legendary service for members. All the people at AAA are always focused at making a good experience for the members. And then to extend to that, to make sure that employees are able to work together as well, just like how we have cultural clubs at high school, they have something called business resource groups. So these usually consist of minorities, and it got cut off here, but also other groups that need more support. For example, there's Escalera for Hispanics, that's the one I have right here. And then there's also one such as AAPI, that's called Aspire. There's one for women's, and there's one for caregivers. Next slide, please. On the topic of soft skills, one of the most important things I saw was definitely about communication. For today, I'll just only talk about the scheduling conflicts. Again, AAA unexpectedly added a 5th week to our schedule. So I know everyone else's internships, I would assume, are done, right? But then because of that schedule conflict, and to add on top of that, the fact that we have different managers every single week, I learned a lot about professional emailing, knowing who to reach out to get those in, and making sure to communicate not only with those higher ups, but also with my team members to make sure that we're able to coordinate together and make this as smooth and successful as possible. Next slide, please. If it loads, it takes a while to load. This is one of the presentations that we made for AAA. This was in our first week, and then we made a short presentation together about the history of AAA. Next slide, please. Overall, though, I would especially want to emphasize, as a computer science-based internship, it wasn't really that much about the hard skills necessarily. They did teach us SQL, which is SQL, a database language that's able to sort through, say, Excel spreadsheets. They did show us how to use RStudio, which we're doing this week, And they did show us how to protect ourselves from phishing emails and how to recognize them. But the biggest focus was always about the soft skills. It was always about networking first, always about speech and writing, especially when it comes to those schedule conflicts, and learning how to lead ourselves, lead each other as a group, and communicate effectively with others. Next slide. The biggest thing that I kept hearing over and over again from our HR director, Noi, was that for this internship, whatever you put in is whatever you get out. And it really stood out to me in my expectations for it. One click, please. So at first, I thought, honestly, this was boring. I am a computational biology major. That's what I want to do. So what the heck am I doing in IT, right? But I actually learned, another click here, it was a lot more exciting than I thought. They exposed me to how many fields there are that are affected by IT. In fact, many of the people that work in AAA now were at some point. Some of them are healthcare workers, some of them have psychology degrees, some of them don't even have a degree. There's one manager that I met that went to fashion school for a while. And she learned all these experiences just through her leadership and through her expertise that weren't necessarily technical. Another click, please. Instead of being just technical as well, a click, we went more high level. That's the word that they love to use in the business. Everything was very high level. We got the broad strokes, we got the big ideas, and it really helped us formulate whether or not we want to do it, not necessarily just to learn one programming language. And finally, 2 more clicks. Instead of having a very narrow focus, which what I would thought is all straight programming, it was actually a lot more expansive, a lot more inclusive, and a lot more fun than I really thought it was going to be. Next slide, please. So if I had to take 3 main takeaways, my first one is that really, again, IT is everywhere. Funnily enough, I've been visiting UCI recently. There was another schedule conflict that came up. But even at UCI in an academic fashion, in the industry, even including insurance, and more traditional places, including the government, then IT is still necessary to provide support, not only for the services that they use. You'd be surprised, say, how many services that AAA needs to help keep their business running, but as well as throughout any industry by this point. Anything that involves touching a computer, which we are all very familiar with. Learning to code does not hurt, even if it's not used in the day-to-day. All the stories that I heard of people in IT, especially the ones that didn't have the computer science degree at the time, or it wasn't even offered at the time, then they had to learn on their own in the business application. That's how they got the real world experience, right? And also the path is never linear. So in general, I've noticed that those who've had detours in their careers are, in my opinion, they're the most interesting people to talk to. Because instead of following this tried and true path, they are able to prove with their soft skills, with their charisma, and with their adaptations that people can go anywhere. It's not necessarily just one goal in mind at the end. So that's been my experience. Thank you so much for listening.